No matter who you vote for, your beliefs, or your appearance, we all have an equal right to vote in our nation's elections. You can believe in any party or any affiliation you'd like. You can also believe that no matter who we vote for, the results are the same, and that no matter who wins, we actually lose. You can believe that if you want. No judgments. As in other times of shifting policy in our nation, the right to vote for African Americans was only truly won when fought for by brave people standing up for what they believed in, courageous soldiers on the front lines of the civil rights movement. During the summer of 1964 in Mississippi, a reported 60 homes or churches were burned, 4 individuals killed, as well as many injuries and arrests. Freedom Summer was designed to draw attention to the very real violence faced by black voters in Mississippi at the time. Robert Moses, born 1935, was a major influence on the civil rights movement and on Dr. King himself. Moses became the director of the Council of Federated Organizations, which had oversight over many different organizations within Mississippi to coordinate civil rights. Among the organizations under the umbrella of the Council were the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the NAACP, and the Congress of Racial Equality. In 1963, a mock election was held as a precursor to Freedom Summer to test and see how many African American voters would come out, knowing there would be violence and resistance against them being able to vote. Aaron Henry of the NAACP became the leader of this movement. He led rallies and organized volunteers to combat the violence that they were sure to face. At these rallies, emergency services blared their horns and shouted over leaders of the movement in an attempt to diminish their impact. From November 2nd to the 4th, mock elections were held all over Mississippi for colored voters. Among other places, they held the elections in churches, barbershops, anywhere they could get Mississippi voters of color to come out. 83,000 Mississippians cast their ballots, and the Freedom Vote was a success. In June of 1964, volunteers numbering around 1,000 began arriving at the Western College for Women in Oxford, Ohio. They trained in registering black voters, they taught black history, and they also promoted the message of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. Things intensified when 3 volunteers went missing while investigating a church that was burnt down in Mississippi. James Chaney, Michael Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman were the victims. The KKK was thought to be responsible for these attacks as well as the burned church. With 64 being a voting year, around 17,000 black Mississippians registered to vote, and only about 1,200 were accepted to cast their votes. I think this highlights the need for major changes in federal law at the time. A group of 41 freedom schools were established by the movement and began educating black voters on the principles of the civil rights movement, black history, as well as leadership skills to equip them for the vote to come. After Dr. King made an appearance in Greenwood, the 3 volunteers that went missing were found dead. About the murders, Dr. King was quoted as saying, "An attack on the human brotherhood taught by all great religions of mankind." August 4th, 1964. Speaking further about voting rights for people of color in Mississippi, Dr. King was quoted as saying, "Our nation sent out Peace Corps volunteers throughout the underdeveloped nations of the world, and none of them have experienced the kind of brutality and savagery that these voter registration workers have suffered here in Mississippi." And just one more quote from Dr. King about the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. "If you value your party, if you value your nation, if you value democratic government, you have no alternative but to recognize, with full voice and vote, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party." Although there were already amendments in the Constitution to allow for people of color to vote, individual districts and states used deceitful tactics to stop black voters from using their vote. These tactics include poll taxes and literacy tests. On July 2, 1964, President Lyndon Johnson signed into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964. He did so with great resistance to the progress that began with his predecessor, who was killed on November 22, 1963. President Johnson used 75 pens to sign the law and gave those pens out to congressional supporters as well as civil rights activists. The bill effectively ended segregation on the grounds of race and provided the groundwork for anti-discrimination laws that came to affect other groups as well. In one of the final pushes for voting rights, the Selma to Montgomery March was organized and met with extreme prejudice. When protesters refused to turn back, the authorities beat them with nightsticks and whips and used tear gas. This horrifying reaction captivated the entire nation and ultimately led to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The bill passed in Congress, though not unanimously, and was signed into law on August 6, 1965. This law sought to do away with the deceptive tactics used in state and local elections to exclude people of color. On April 4, 1968, the civil rights movement lost one of its most prominent voices with the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King.
This is the worst!
The aftermath of his death brought massive protests in 125 cities. The ending toll was 39 dead, 3,500 injured.
Now, when I say that I want these things, I mean that I want them, and I don't want to have to ask again.
And this led to the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. Even the most basic rights that we enjoy required sacrifices by brave protesters, people standing for what they truly believe in. The civil rights era was fraught with tension and prejudice, not only by members of society, but by members of authority. Although these acts and bills guaranteed certain rights, the civil rights era was far from over, and I believe we're still trying our best as a nation to make up for these prejudiced times today. What is seen as acceptable in any point in history may in the future be seen in a completely different light. Our nation promised these voting rights many times, but until there was widespread outrage, no laws were ever changed. You could say the same for the workers' rights movement. You could say the same for other anti-discrimination laws. People have to be outraged in a large number in order for anything to change. Remember that as we work as a nation to be better every day. Thank you so much for watching. This is Billy, BI1LY3D, on YouTube, TikTok, and on Instagram. Thank you so much. Please let me know what you thought of the video. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't done so already. And tell me what you think. Have a great day.